Hello, and for those of you who don't know her, I'd like to introduce to you my lovely roommates of 4 years. The roommates from the lesser parts of California, if I like to say so myself, the northern part. Amelia is currently the captain of CG Sabre team, honoring and honors in science because she cares about the environment, and is challenging herself by learning how to pole vault this spring. No broken bones. Let's go. So, please give it up for Amelia Lehman.
Thanks for that great speech, Giselle, besides the diss at California. So the title of, The title of my EagleTalks is Mind, Body, and Spirit, the education of an eating disorder. Coming to Culver as a small, chubby freshman, I remember looking around at all these kids and feeling so inadequate. And I'm not the only one. 7 out of 10 girls believe that they are not attractive enough. 75% of girls with low self-esteem reported engaging in negative activities like cutting, bullying, smoking, drinking, or disordered eating. Girls are developing lower self-esteem earlier in life due to a lie that is portrayed that one must be attractive to be worthy. But it's not only girls who feel this pressure to be attractive. 40% of middle school boys regularly exercise with the goal of increasing muscle mass. 38% of boys report using protein supplements from middle school to high school, and 6% admitted to experimenting with steroids. We see this at Culver. Walk into the gym. You'll see freshman boys over-exercising, feeling the pressure to be attractive, to be fit, to be what they believe is healthy. Yet they don't know that over-exercising and intense exercise at a young age can weaken your bones and cause injuries to occur frequently. So why do teen boys and teen girls who have barely begun to develop feel so much pressure to be attractive and associate muscle mass or skinniness with the epitome of fitness and health? This is where the importance of health education comes in. Health education is an opportunity to teach kids like myself and the ones in this room what a healthy me is supposed to look like. While I believe health education did a great job educating me about bloodborne pathogens and different types of mental illnesses, the education system generally fails when it comes to individual health. I never learned the importance of having fat on my body. I never learned that muscle definition doesn't mean strength. Most health education systems prolong the lies that society portrays as healthy traits. That one must be skinny and or lean to be attractive, but also healthy. I remember in my sophomore year having to calculate my BMI because it's a great way to see how healthy I am. But in actuality, it shows nothing about how healthy I am as an individual. For those who don't know what BMI is, it's a supposed method that determines a person's body fat percentage by taking into account one's height. It was never meant to be used on an individual level. Its only purpose was to figure out a large populations of people if they're in the healthy range. This is because BMI penalizes people for having greater muscle mass. If you don't believe me, take a look at Muhammad Ali in his prime. His BMI was 25.7, and his classification would be overweight. Sorry. Yet, in this class, I was not only supposed to calculate my BMI to see if I was healthy, but also convert it into a color. Am I green, red, or yellow? How Demoralizing is that for a student, that a 0.1 difference is the change between healthy and overweight. And then we take it one step further to determine whether I am green, yellow, or red for health. At that time, I was 15, and most other students in that class were 14 to 16. We weren't even adults yet. We hadn't finished going through puberty. Our bodies were and are going through many changes outside of our control. Yet health class doesn't teach us about the extreme weight fluctuation of teens. Society and health classes make us believe that the way that we look is 100% in our control, which is a complete lie. So why do we keep portraying it and shaming people for the way they look? Because even if you believe someone is healthy, even if their numbers seem healthy, they may not be. During my sophomore year, I was in the green zone. I was eating less than 1,220 calories a day. To put that into perspective, a toddler is supposed to eat 1,000 to 4,000 calories, 1,400 calories a day. I was an athlete going through puberty and attending classes on less than the recommended calories for a toddler. And my health class told me it was okay, that I was in the green zone, that I was healthy because my BMI was 0.4 above underweight. Health is more than a number on a scale. Health is more than what you look like in a mirror. A healthy body for yourself is one that cannot be told by a number on a scale or a BMI calculator. Healthy is how you treat your body mentally and physically. And this is something that took me long to learn. And the greatest enemy to this is shame. Yet in my health classes and my senior health class, we have students watch videos such as Super Size Me, which is a documentary that basically shames people for the way they look. They have students track everything they eat to see if they're eating too much sugar one day or too much fat another. This is where many eating disorders begin. This is when students' self-worth begins to drop. When not only our social norms teach us to feel bad for not being skinny enough or lean enough, but when our classes make us feel shameful for eating a cookie on a bad day. This creates students to develop unhealthy relationships with their food and the ways they cope. There are many different types of disorders that students can develop from these unhealthy habits, such as anorexia to exercise addiction, but they all follow the cycle of guilt. The cycle of guilt is the reason why people repeatedly harm themselves in this way. When people begin to feel shame for their actions, they become increasingly stressed and search for any form of comfort. From starving themselves to excessive workouts, they are searching for relief, but the relief doesn't last long. Students are developing a short-term but deadly solution to cope with the shame and guilt that societies and health classes make them feel. The only way to break this cycle of guilt is to relieve people of their shame. Yet our education system continues to shame these people who don't meet the societal standards of beauty and which they eventually portray as the healthy physique. If nothing changes about our health education system in America or at Culver, these problems will continue to harm students' spirits, bodies, and minds. When one is not taking care of their body, when one lacks the amount of food and therefore energy, it affects the ability to think. It can affect students' academic success. Mind fog is a type of cognitive fatigue, and it creates a cloudy condition in your brain. Mind fog reduces people's ability to store new or recall old information. It partially impairs the student's understanding of language, and it makes people lose the ability to make calculations and resolve problems quickly. And eating disorders can cause mind fog, because not only when you lack the energy, you not only lack the energy when you're having an eating disorder, but all you can think about are food and exercise. Students are requiring a worse education not only in their health class, but over their entire high school career because they are obsessed with the idea that attraction is equal to worthiness. Health classes should not be about tracking the minute detail of everything we eat, but making us more aware of the importance of feeling physically and mentally well. Health classes should teach students the importance of having fat on their body, and that there is such a thing as over-exercising, instead of having me run the mile and compare myself to my peers and world averages. Health classes should teach students recipes and ways to enjoy nutritious foods instead of making us feel so scared to cook with oil. Health classes should teach students that healthy looks different for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amelia and Jack. You guys did amazing, and I think we all appreciated their messages. So now after having heard from our two amazing student speakers, we also have two members of the cohort faculty with, what's up? with amazing stories to tell us and amazing messages to share with us. I want to introduce our next speaker with a little bit of personal story as well. So my freshman year spring break, I went on a GPS trip to Puerto Escondido, Mexico. And upon return from that trip, I decided to take Spanish as a sophomore for my first year's foreign language class. I talked to Miss Dice, and then she told me that learning about foreign language at Culver is supposed to be an experience that combines learning about the language itself and learning about the culture. But for my first 2 years of Spanish in sophomore year and junior year, I didn't really feel like there was a dimension of culture to it. I think I was mainly memorizing conjugation, memorizing grammatical structures and vocabularies, and other things like that. And it wasn't until in senior year when I took Honors Spanish 3 when I really found out how learning language can be this forging of a gateway through which you can really learn about a world that is different from your own. What was so magical about that class? I think it has something to do with that class teacher. So I will now welcome Mr. Bardo to the stage.
So my name is Aaron Bardo, and I'm here to lead you through Travel to Believe. Hopefully you will learn a little bit about my life and my learning and how I teach and bring that into the classroom. So my journey started out when I was your age, in high school, where I went to Phillips Academy, Andover, and my father was a teacher there for 40 years, and my brother was a year older than me, the captain of the lacrosse team, and definitely kind of a big deal on campus. So I felt that I did not have my own place there and really could not find my own shadow. So I went as far away as possible, and I went to Spain, where I went to school year abroad. And there, many things occurred. I'm going to, because I get to see all of you in your awkward high school phases, I'm going to share this with you. There I am with my father, who was the teacher for 40 years, and my brother on his graduation day. So, we travel initially to lose ourselves, and we travel next to find ourselves. My journey is going to take you through the 9 years I lived abroad, where we are going to highlight, there are many stories I'd love to get into, but I'm going to highlight just a few occasions that really stood out to me and changed who I was as a person and also as a teacher, and things that I definitely do try to bring into the classroom. You go away for a long time and return a different person. You never come all the way back. When I was living in Spain, I was out with some friends, and from behind, I felt, I got hit from behind, slapped in the face, in the back of the head, and I turned around and no one was there. And so I thought, okay, I guess I'll just wait, because I knew that I was gonna get hit again. And so I got hit again from the other side, and I turned around and I was able to confront this person. And it was a very heated exchange, as you can imagine, at the beginning. But we were able to work through that. And it turns out that he projected upon me, this is in 2004 and 2005, and what's going on at that time period, there's a word in Spanish, historia, and that means history and story at the same, in the same word. And that's going to be something that's repeating throughout this. And in this moment, history and my story really interlocked because he projected on me the Iraq War and George W. Bush. And for him, that's what I represented. I was, George W. Bush, I was this war, and he was bringing all that hate onto me. The lesson that I learned from this experience was that we, no matter who our leaders are, no matter where we are in the world, those images and those leaders get projected upon us. And I think that's something that's very important. And another thing is that our actions, we don't know how far they're going to extend in time and in space. So George W. Bush's actions, how those reflected upon me or this person, and how my actions reflect upon other people. We never know who we are going to affect or when it's going to happen. Travel doesn't merely broaden mind, it makes it mind. When I was living in Argentina, I studied at Elon University, and then I moved to Argentina for 5 months. And there it was a typical, essentially like textbook situation where I was lost and asking for directions. So very much a classroom situation. And I was bumbling through my Spanish, and I had lived in Spain, so I had this like Spanish teteo, the Spanish accent, right? And that mixed with my gringo accent. And I was a little bit ashamed and worried about my accent. But the woman that I was talking to, who was just a little bit older than I was, she said, "Oh my goodness, I love your accent." And I thought, what? My accent sounds terrible. This is awful. And for me, I use this anecdote in my classes because it's something that really pushed me to go outside of my comfort zone, and it really helped me embrace my accent. And of course, we always need to work on our pronunciation, but for those students that really worry and are very self-conscious about what they sound like, this is a story that really helped me in my language learning, and I think it can really help within the classroom as well. How long is forever? Sometimes just 1 second. Living in Chile for the first time, I had graduated from Elon University, and the job market was terrible in 2009, so I used my language abilities to teach English abroad. And so when I was down there, it was actually my birthday, so February 27th, 2010, so the 12th year anniversary is coming up. And I was out, and it was about 3 in the morning, and I was on the beach, and I walk outside, and the dogs all seem to be looking at the ocean. And I get a weird sensation, and then all of the earth starts to move. And first it's calm, and then it becomes very violent. And so what was happening, the light poles, for example, started to sway back and forth, and then they started slamming each side of the ground. And then the earth started to move in waves, and you could actually physically see it moving in waves because I was on the beach and it's very loose land. And the telephone wires start to snap, and the sparks start to fly, and then chaos ensues. People start running everywhere. The dogs are barking. The cliffs are spewing rocks. And one of the people that I was with said, we need to go, there's gonna be a tsunami. And so we run to the car, and the car is like, it had hydraulics in it. It was hopping up and down, and we could barely get into it. And finally, once we did get in, we got in and we drove, and I was driving, and I was swerving around dogs, people, rocks, and we drove up to the cliffs, and we stayed up all night looking at the moon, which was illuminating the ocean, which was moving in ways that I've never seen the ocean move before. And it turned out it was an 8.8 earthquake. It was the 5th largest in the history of humankind, and it actually shifted the earth on its axis. and there was a tsunami, just not where I was. And it showed me that moment. There's many times where I found the fragility of life in Chile, but that, I think, and the violence of it was a moment where it really was undeniable. Travel holds the magical possibility of reinvention, that you find a place you love to begin a new life and never go home. When I moved from Chile to New Zealand, and I went on a working holiday visa. And that is a one-year visa where you are essentially, I found out when I was there, really like a migrant worker. So you have three options, which I didn't know. I was coming from Chile. I thought I had all this experience teaching, I had experience writing, I'm gonna get a job in either one of those things. Wrong. When I got there, the rude awakening was that I had to go back to my college days and my high school days and use my curriculum from working in Pizza Hut or working in Subway or working in any restaurants. And I went door to door for 3 weeks trying to find a job in hospitality. So the other options would have been as a migrant worker, which I did pick fruit on a vineyard for a little while, or as a construction worker. So when I got the job, I started as a busboy in a fine dining restaurant, and I started very much at the bottom of the hierarchy. And within that year, I studied wine, I studied food, and I studied pairings, and I was promoted to manager throughout that year. And I was invited to stay in New Zealand for a year, and then another year, and then invited for residency. We decided not to stay. I also met my wife in New Zealand, and we decided to move from there. Nothing behind me, everything ahead of me, as is ever so on the road. So because we decided to move, we were gonna move back to Chile, but we wanted to take a little time to do that. So we decided to take a 6-month honeymoon. And in that 6-month honeymoon, we traveled all throughout New Zealand, all throughout Australia, Southeast Asia, Europe, and then finally into the United States and Latin America. And in that time, of course, there are a myriad of moments that stand out, but one more so than others is when I was on the border from Thailand to Cambodia, and we were walking through, it's a land border, and when we were there, it was one of the sketchiest borders I've ever been through. And the border guard actually, he saw my blue passport, right, saw this insignia on it, saw my skin color, and immediately asked for a bribe. And so I did obviously have to pay that bribe. I was able to negotiate, but I did pay the bribe. And then I had to write a letter to the Cambodian government thanking them for letting me come into their country. But while we're in this border, and you really are in this limbo, it's a very much a purgatorial state, which you're not in one country and you can't get to this other one. And while we were there, there was an image that will always stick with me, where there was a child, a Cambodian child on the ground, naked, and kind of writhing in suffering, writhing in pain, crying, in dirt and mud, and the mother was somewhere along the line asking for money, and there was no father. And the thought occurred to me, what is the difference between me and this child? And it really was that passport, right? It was that I was lucky enough to be born with this different skin color, with this blue passport, and within the borders of a different country. And so that is something that I always try to bring to my classroom, that we can understand our immense privilege that we have here. I wish I had come to it sooner. I wish when I was back in that French class that I had connected the conjugations, verbs, and gender nouns to something grander. I wish someone had told me what that class really was, a gate to some blue world. So after coming from Southeast Asia, especially with the United States history in Cambodia and Vietnam, I looked a little bit more intensely at my own history. And I wondered why my friends in Chile would call me El Gringo, or CIA agent, which they would do often in a loving way, but there was definitely truth in jest. And so I did go into our history and study that. And this actually led to my master's thesis at Middlebury. But I would go to for example, the Museum of Memory and Human Rights in Chile, where they have the actual names of the CIA agents that helped start the coup in Chile in 1973 that overthrew Allende and put Pinochet in power, a right-wing dictator from 1973 to 1990. So I went through and I read this story, and I read all these histories of the interventions that we have had within Latin America throughout the Cold War. And for me, that was something that was incredibly relevant because we look at the immigration, what's going on now. There was just an honors project, for example, about Haitian immigrants traveling through Latin America. And we demonize these people and we marginalize these people without understanding that our government and our place had a key role in where we're at right now. So I find that learning our history and not whitewashing our history is essential to our classroom and to learning. I love America more than any other country in the world, and exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. At Culver, we do claim that we are a leadership school, and that is definitely something that I can get behind. We have the MICE model, which says challenge the process, enable others to act, and encourage the heart. But how can we be leaders if we blindly follow? So I encourage you to learn your history, understand your privilege, and enable the diaspora who live in limbo to have those same opportunities. So travel to believe, travel to teach, and travel to learn. Travel to become the person you knew you never could be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bardo, for the amazing presentation. And now we are approaching to our last speech of the day from a very special person who many of us know as a mentor instructor and as a giant who built the Culver Humanities program, right? But me and my fellow AP English Literature students know her as a person who introduced us to the amazing world of novels, plays, and literature, who introduced us to little innocent Catherine Mullen's journey into the world, learning about evilness and betrayal, and Marlowe, the 19th century European explorer's experience journeying into the heart of darkness under Joseph Conrad's pen. And also, 2 years ago in the summer of my sophomore year, I found myself struggling over a decision of picking which book to read. On one side, I had a fictional book, obviously, a made-up story. And on the other side, I had a history book about American Indian history. Which decision would you make? The fiction or the nonfiction? What I reasoned back then was perhaps I would spend more time learning about what actually happened instead of a made-up story. Right? After all, what can we learn from a story that's made up, that's fake? Think about what decision you will make and if Dr. Irwin's speech would change your mind.
Okay, that's good. Mean English teacher, never mind this humanities. Oh my. You are 3 hard acts to follow. I will just put that out there. Everybody, one more round of applause for all of you. Every story and perspective is an invitation to look at yourselves and the worlds you are part of, whether enrich your lives and the lives of others. I am truly honored to be with you tonight. So, I have a story to start with, except it's history, not literature. Okay, picture New York City, 1841. It's still the era of sailing ships, right? And a ship is sailing from England. It arrives at the docks of New York City. There is a big crowd on the docks, and people are agitated, and they're really anxious, and they cry out to the sailors on the ship, and they cry out this, "Did little Nell die?" Well, they were waiting news about her fate. So who was little Nell? Yeah, she's just a character from a Charles Dickens serialized novel, The Old Curiosity Shop. Just an imaginary character from an author most of you would deem boring, although a very rich source of vocab find. Because, you know, he's guilty of writing classic literature. He was a bestseller of his time period, of course. But why did so many ordinary and even illiterate people crowd that dock to ask that question of the sailors? This really did happen. To answer that question, we're going to go exploring a very different type of landscape from the ones offered by my colleagues up here. We're going to tackle a different kind of challenge instead of the landscapes that Mr. Bardo had to deal with and some of those people, good Lord. Glad you made it here safely. That earthquake, that's no joke. So we're going to have a much easier challenge right now. And it's the question that Steve threw at me. Yeah, why does literature matter? Well, first, consider the fact that stories, and we're going to start first with stories, are ubiquitous across all cultures. There are stories in every single culture. But why? Why do humans tell stories? The primary reason is to make sense out of experience. The worlds that we inhabit can seem chaotic, beyond our control, especially when you have homework due, right? And beyond our comprehension. As humans, we crave a sense of order. And one of the ways we discern order is through language, and language's ability to sort through chaos and identify patterns to create this sense of order. For example, in a very simple way, being able to put a single word or a name to a problem or experience provides a sense of understanding and relief, even if the problem is terrible. What do I mean? Say you have a friend, a parent, a grandparent who becomes egregiously sick and they are suffering. You want to know why. A single word, although it will induce sadness, still helps. The answer could be simply the word cancer. You have an answer, don't you? So, language and understanding of this world comes with a sense of being able to say there are causes and there are effects. And then as humans, we realize that things happen in chronological order, right? And this is great. These techniques help us process problems and solve them in our lives. But that's usually not really entirely satisfactory. There's still something missing. So I want you to imagine We're gonna go somewhere, so use your imaginations. Go to a hospital's ICU unit. Think of what that's like. I'm sure you've all seen pictures thanks to COVID, right? Think about taking your bird's eye view. There lies the patient on a bed, and there are all these tubes and needles, and the nurses are there, and everybody's all bundled up, and there's the family. And the patient is dying. But the family is importuning the doctor, pleading with the doctor to try extreme measures, right? Procedures. And we hear the doctor say, yeah, that's going to be futile. At this point, these procedures will not, they cannot work. And yet, according to a Dr. Truack, an ICU specialist who has written on this topic, it's really important to the families that the doctor still try. Why? In order for the family to have a narrative, a story that they can live with. The futile efforts in these cases are crucial for closure in the stories the families take with them out of the ICU. The story actually makes some sense of the death. Well, everything possible was done. It was meant to be. Thus, stories help us psychologically and spiritually, absolutely. And they help us make sense of, I don't know, I'm sorry about hitting all these buttons. But they also make sense in matters a little less dire than life and death, right? What's cool about stories is that they are inherently shared experiences. And in the sharing, they both create and foster our sense of community. Very broadly speaking, think of epics like the Odyssey or Beowulf. Not many of you took my course, but there you go. Those are epics, but we have epics today. How many of you like the Marvel Universe movies? Those are epics. And what do those do? They show the distilled values of the cultures that produce them. And more narrowly, friendships, personal connections arise as we go to coffee houses or dorm rooms and talk about the latest hot bestseller, or maybe even a humanities assigned reading, right? Well, maybe not. Depends. Except my students will do so, right? It's on that discussion you can't get out of. Right, absolutely, absolutely. But there's another way that we share stories. We share stories with the characters in the books that we read. We're sharing their experience. We are sharing their world. So as a member of either a very large and broad culture or a small group or as individuals, we experience stories as ways to participate in and eventually begin to understand and appreciate other cultures, other time periods, other genders, other age groups. Yeah, try appreciating my age group, please. Other social classes, and other belief and value systems. And we do so not through that sort of arm's length intellectual exercise in which we arrange facts and slot them, which is the job of scientists, economists, historians, right? No. We do so as a temporary denizen of the world of the story. We're in that world. We're with those characters. So through stories, we experience otherness An otherness not possible in the mundane world we live in. We can be somebody for a while, utterly different from the person we believe ourselves to be. And we can sense what it is like then to flee one's city and wander turbulent seas in search of a new home in war-torn lands. And I was thinking of the Aeneid, and I'm thinking of what's happening in Ukraine right now. You can begin to see that stories can connect with current events. But we can also see what it's like to wave a wand and fight a duel with a villainous wizard gone wrong, right? Or to be disdained by a very wealthy upper-class man and prove his prejudice wrong at the end and marry him and get all his money. There you go. Or to go hitchhiking across the galaxy in a universe in which the ultimate answer is 42. So, we become a part of an alternative world, and what we gain from these stories, and particularly those designated as literature, is something that a number of non-literary professions are beginning to value. And what they're beginning to value is what literature, some studies indicate, creates in us, and that is, oh, here's this word, empathy. Isn't that exciting? Actually, it is. I did some interesting reading for this talk, and boy, was I surprised. You get these writers in these very different fields saying things like, well, reading literature matters because it's, quote, it's like a training course in understanding others. And then there's a cognitive psychologist who says, fiction is the mind's flight simulator. That's kind of cool. And they note that in their research, people who read novels appear to be better than average at reading other people's emotions. In other words, they have higher EQs than non-readers of fiction. What's EQ? Anybody know? Yes, excellent. You guys are good. And indeed, there is some research that begins to suggest a correlation between the reading of literary fiction and, get this, improved social behavior. So, the relationship between reading fiction, especially literary fiction, and empathy development is considered real enough despite some controversy, because you can't have anything published in journals today that doesn't then get challenged, which is the way it's supposed to work. But it's considered real enough that there are some institutions that have begun to integrate literature studies into their programs. And I'm not talking about the moribund English departments at universities. No, there is a medical school in Irvine, California that now makes the study of literature part of their training of doctors. And this was especially fun. A recent Harvard Business Review article. Do you think they really care about literature? Well, here's what they had to say. I quote, "If we want better thinkers in the business world, we have to build better readers." And they meant of fiction. So they went on to say, business leaders who read fiction will have the expanded ability to understand and respond to multiple competing viewpoints. And this reading of literary fiction increases, quote, social acuity and sharper ability to comprehend other people's motivations. Reading nonfiction might certainly be valuable for collecting knowledge, but it does little to develop EQ, a far more elusive goal. Yeah, well, that's kind of fun. Interesting. So in the business world, you have people beginning to say, good business leaders should be reading good novels. Kind of fun. Doctors, and I happen to agree with this, should read good novels. But how does literary fiction accomplish this creation of empathy, of really understanding and caring about others? The idea is It's through in-depth access to characters' minds and lives, not just in a single event or two, but over expanded time periods. We also don't discount these characters and their worlds as simply fake news. Very interesting article in a juried journal did a test, and they did, I think it had to do with empathy. They gave the same information as an expository piece, as a short story, and as fake news. Empathy went up with the story, was sort of neutral with the expository, and man, it created negativity if people were told it was fake news. Interesting. But if we know we're reading fiction, we don't discount it as fake news. And we don't ignore those who come across as very different from us in terms of our sense of our social world and our being. They're very different, and it's okay. In fact, we're more curious, right? Their belief systems can be different. Age, gender, all those things can be different, and we buy in, even if it's the villain. Think of poor Edmund in King Lear, baby students, right? Scientific American says, why read fiction? Why, it disrupts readers' expectations, undermining prejudices and stereotypes while exploring and teaching values embedded in social behaviors. I don't expect Scientific American to be rah-rah literature. Look what it's saying. So, does literature have value? Interesting. Yes, of course it does. It augments your vocabulary. All of my students, stand up, who've had me, stand up. We're going to do my second favorite word in unison. Are you ready? Take your dignity, just set it aside. Ready, let's go. VICISSITUGES. See what literature is? Thank you. That counts as vocab lines. So yes, you can increase your vocabulary. You can increase your access to beautifully used language, to new ways to express yourself. You can pick it up from reading great books. And great authors experiment all the time. You can look at how they're experimenting. It's a wonderful thing. But literature has another type of value. I began with 1841 and Charles Dickens' The Old Curiosities. If you want to know if Little Nell lived, guess what I'm going to say?
No.
No, go read the book. Gee, or Google it. That's what you'll do anyway. Yeah. Another type of value, since I mentioned the Harvard Business Review. Just before the release of J.K. Rowling's 6th Harry Potter novel, there was a great deal of speculation about which character was going to die and who would do it. In fact, this was such a question that the publisher's security of the printed books was super tight. Bets were being brought to betting places across Great Britain about who the character would be and who would be responsible. And finally, a copy of the book was stolen before the official release. And the thief hoped to sell it to one of the big newspapers and was expecting to get up to £50,000. I'd say literature has some value. Right? The newspaper reported that the book was retrieved. Somebody else found out and it hit the internet, so there you go. Sometimes you just can't win. Anyway, but why would all this fall off? Why read literature? Why did people do this to Rowling's novel? Well, obviously, the thief did it because he knew readers really cared about these characters. They cared about this world of wonder that was created, that to them, even though they knew it was fiction, was important. A world they willingly entered into and wanted to continue to enter into. And that's obviously one of the big reasons to read literature. And Rowling is literature. It's not just to get to know all these other different types of people, that's huge. It's also to enter into a world of absolutely incredible marvels, of being able to pose questions and what ifs. And what's really best about literature is the intangible wealth it gives us that only not reading can rob you of. I have one more reason to read literature. Yeah, duh, it's fun. Thank you.
Thank you all again for coming. I have a couple of thanks to give as we conclude our event with Dr. Irwin's amazing message. First of all, thank you to our 4 speakers who spent so much time preparing for their speeches and presented us with all these amazing presentations and messages and stories. Thank you so much. Also, if you have saw these 2 individuals running around with cameras like crazy people taking photos of you, thank you to Roy Zhao, our student photographer, and I don't know your name, but
Mr. Chanta.
Oh, you're welcome.
yeah, thank you guys, thank you. And last but not least, also thank you to Ms. Cerny and Stephen Yang who helped us, get this place and get all the chairs around, get all the tables moved around. These hardware support are obviously very necessary to us making this event happen. So thank you to all. This now concludes our event. Also, thank you for every single one of you coming here to support us, support our 4 speakers, listen to all these amazing stories. I hope you all can walk away having learned something from these amazing presentations. So thank every single one of you for coming. Yes, Maya.
Would you like help cleaning up for the chairs?
Yes. So this is a bit complicated because all the tables are in there, so we need to move the tables out and turn this back into a classroom. If you guys have time to stay behind, I would really appreciate if you guys can help me and Stephen put the tables back. But otherwise, you guys are dismissed. Also, you can stand up and go to the speakers who you would like to talk about if you want to have some further communications or questions as well. But this concludes the event, and thank you for coming.
Also, extra brownies.
Extra brownies.
I want my brownie. Everyone want my brownie. Go get your brownie.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I got one.